Hello everybody and welcome to another video. Today I'm going to be introducing a new series that I'm going to try to do on my channel, but before that let me just give you a little bit of an update. It is 10 p.m. and it's April, let me check the time. It's April 8th at 10 p.m. I've actually been up all day, surprisingly, but I had a Zoom meeting for class this morning, so I just never went back to bed afterwards, which is something I usually do, but I was actually awake, so I didn't, and today I have colored for probably about 4 hours. The first 2 hours were because I was bored, then I went and did some stuff, and then I got randomly anxious, so the second 2 hours were stress coloring. And I've been listening to a lot of videos by Dissociated and also Try Guys podcasts. So yeah, that's been my day. But the AP exam for my AP psychology class is May 19th. And I thought it would be a great time to start reviewing. I'd actually started a few days earlier by beginning to copy over my notes from the notes that I had before into a notebook where they are actually kind of readable, and I don't know if anyone will find this interesting, but I'm doing it personally because I think it will help me remember the material better and learn it better. And so I'm going to basically be teaching you guys all the material that I learned, or reading my notes and then adding elaboration where I think it necessary, basically. So the next several videos, the audio will probably be me talking about psychology, and I think that it's stuff that a lot of people should know, but if you don't like that, feel free to turn off the audio, listen to something else, and just watch the video, because hopefully I'll have some cool art here also for you to look at. So I'm going to begin with the first unit that I studied, which was the Introduction to Psychology as a Science. A clinical psychologist is able to diagnose and treat individuals with various psychological disorders. Dualism, innate ideas and minds being entirely distinct from body and being able to survive its death. I'm basically just reading the notes right now. Empiricism, knowledge originates in experience, and science should therefore rely on observation and experimentation. Oh, these are the different, I didn't write that in here. I have two different sets of notes, so let me just flip back to the other one. Sorry that this is so disjointed. Because I didn't do it the way that it is in here. This is talking about the different kinds of ways that the different fields of psychology, not that the different places where you study it, but the different ways that people look at it through, the different ways that people, the different lenses that people view psychology through. So these are some of the very original ones, the ones when psychology was first being invented. And these three that I'm about to read are the main ones that are based, everything else that we have now is based off of, which is structuralism, functionalism, and then the Gestalt school, which merged into one of them, but I forget which. So structuralism uses introspection to reveal the structure of the human mind, and functionalism explored how mental and behavioral processes function. So structuralism was a lot of just thinking about the way they would study it is they would ask patients to talk about how they felt and what they were thinking about and use that to diagnose them, versus functionalism tried to see what people were thinking while they did different things, and what doing different things, doing things and experiencing things, how that affected the mental health of something. And then the main idea that the Gestalt school of thought contained was that perceptions are more than the sums of their parts. Rather, they are wholes that give shape or meaning to the parts. That is some notes on how to write an FRQ. And I don't have the prompt, otherwise I would read it because I actually found it very helpful. Then here are the different perspectives of psychology. So the different ways that people, these are the current ones, the different ways that people do it, which is the psychoanalytic, biopsychology, evolutionary psychology, behaviorism, humanism, the cognitive perspective, and the sociocultural perspective. So the psychoanalytic perspective, which is the one that Freud favored and came from structuralism, I believe. I'm just reading my notes, not my book, so maybe I should read my book too. Psychoanalytic attributes our thoughts and actions to unconscious motives and conflicts, so it focuses a lot on the subconscious and like dreams and your childhood and that sort of thing. Biopsychology emphasizes the influence of biology on our behavior, so that really focuses on your genetics and how your like body works, kind of. So like if there's an actual like problem in your body, like if you have a blood disease and it's affecting the way your brain is working or something like that, but you don't know about the blood disease, that's what biopsychology is. Evolutionary psychology believes that some psychological traits might be more superior for survival, and so that one also focuses on genetic stuff, but it's a lot more like hereditary type, what did we evolve into doing? So like an evolutionary psychologist would say that our amygdala formed its fight or flight response because it was very important for us to know how to deal with stressors in the cave times. Like an animal attacking us, we would need to be ready with all the adrenaline and norepinephrine that are sent out during a fight or flight response from the amygdala and other parts of your brain and your hormone producing areas to get our bodies ready for that. That's what an evolutionary psychologist would talk about. Behaviorism says that psychology should only study observable behaviors, not mental processes. Rewards and punishment shape our learning. So behavioral psychologists are ones you might know of. The guy who invented or came up with, I forget his name right now, but if I describe the experiment that he did where he was, it's not operant conditioning, because operant conditioning is with the pigeon, but the other one is, it's with the dogs and the saliva. Pavlov's dogs experiment. Pavlov is a behavioral scientist, and he invented the one kind of conditioning, and then operant conditioning became a thing from a different psychologist. This is why I need to study, okay? Humanism studies conscious experience, the individual's freedom to choose, and the capacity for personal growth. And Maslow's hierarchy of needs is a main point of humanism. It's a triangle graph, kind of looks like a food pyramid, but instead it shows the layers of things that people need to achieve before they can achieve the highest. I want to say enlightenment because I've been learning about Buddhism, but it's not that. It's just like personal satisfaction with yourself. And so you kind of need to have the basic needs of a human, which is the bottom tiers, like food, shelter, adequate rest, and stuff like that, before you can move on to higher layers such as self-acceptance and having other people accept you, which are also important to a person's psyche. I said psyche, not sucky, just so you understand that. Then the cognitive perspective focuses on how people think, how we take in, process, and retrieve information. So the cognitive perspective focuses on how the brain works within our thoughts and how we think. So behaviorism, evolutionary psychology, and the cognitive perspective can get confused, but biopsychology, evolutionary psychology, and the cognitive perspective, not behaviorism, can get confused. But basically, evolutionary psychology is talking about what things that we have from genetics that are long past genetics that we evolved into, that we have now, but how do we get them? That kind of thing. The cognitive perspective is specifically talking about the brain and how the brain functions. So it does talk a little bit about the physical brain, but it's also talking about like mainly how the physical brain works when the mental brain is working. And the biopsychology perspective talks kind of about also the physical brain, but just the general how the body, the biological system of humans works, comparing to the brain and how that affects your brain and how it works. Yeah. And the last one is sociocultural perspective of psychology, which focuses on how thinking or behavior changes in different contexts or situations. Okay, so the neatly written notes I finished because apparently I didn't write them all in the same place, and the way the other notes are written isn't that most comprehensive, so I hope you will bear with me in that. I think the next thing we have to do is read some names of psychologists. So Wilhelm Wundt was German, which is why I have to say the W with a V, created the first psychological laboratory, which set a precedent for others to do their own experiments. G. Stanley Hall did the same thing, but officially, which helped create the psychological schools of thought. Edward Titchener was in the field of structuralism, and he introduced structuralism and used introspection to try and discover how the mind works and is built, which is kind of the definition of structuralism. But yeah, William James introduced functionalism and taught the first unofficial female psychologist, which helped women get more places in scientific fields in the future. And then Mary Whitton Calkins pioneered memory research and was the first official female psychologist, I guess. I wrote unofficial, but I don't think that's right. I wrote these notes like several months ago. Margaret Floyd Washburn, the first woman to receive a PhD, the second female American Psychological Association president. John B. Watson studied the science of behavior and dismissed introspection. So he was part of the behaviorism group because he thought that it was more important to study behavior and I didn't really need to study the way people were thinking about their behavior. B.F. Skinner elaborated on the law of effect and discovered behavior control. And Skinner, I believe, was the guy who worked on operant conditioning with the birds. Because I think I watched a video and I think he was actually in it. Sigmund Freud focused on childhood experiences and how they greatly affect later life and influence humanity's self-understanding. My handwriting's really bad, so I'm sorry. And then the kind of psychology that kind of developed from his study was Freudian psychoanalysis, which emphasized the ways our unconscious thought processes and our emotional responses to childhood experiences affect our behavior. And then the updated modern version of Freud's ideas is called the psychodynamic approach, because a lot of modern psychologists kind of dismiss a lot of the stuff that Freud was doing, like the exact stuff. Some of the basic ideas or some like more modern fixed up ideas about that are now used, but a lot of the things that he had to say we don't use as much anymore, but we still study it to know where what we know now came from. So Carl Rogers was in a person-centered perspective, and he focused on genuineness, acceptance, and empathy. And I believe he was part of the humanism perspective, and he started to help people have a type of therapy that was positive, like a positive listening type of therapy. I don't think that's what the word is called specifically, but. And then Abraham Maslow created the hierarchy of needs within humanism. And then we have experimental psychologists, are people who explore psychology using the experimental method, which is kind of self-explanatory, but it's written in here. And cognitive neuroscience is the interdisciplinary study of the brain activity linked with cognition. And then within psychology, behavior is studied in relation to mental processes, and mental processes are studied in relation to behavior. And then here are some more important scientists and psychologists. Even Ivan Pavlov, he worked with behaviorism and discovered classical conditioning through the Pavlov's dog experiment, which I feel like a lot of people would know, but I might be wrong. Jean Piaget studied infant cognitive development. Kids don't have many adult brains, which a lot of people thought at the time, that children thought like adults. They were just small adults and didn't know how to speak that things that they were saying, but he was able to figure out that actually children have a completely different way of thinking about the world than adults. For instance, like babies have no concept of object permanence until they're several months old. When you like do peekaboo with a baby, they love it because they don't understand that you are still there. So if you like take a baby and hide a ball from them, they will think the ball is actually gone, even if they see exactly where you put it. If it's behind something, they won't understand that it's just somewhere else because they can't see it. They think it's not there, which is why, which is part of why they are very attached to the parental figures around them, and they get really upset when they can't see their mom anymore, or whoever they were most attached to when they were born. So if they lived with just a single father, then they would still have that similar experience of not understanding that when they went away to work, that they would come back. And, yeah, that's kind of just really sad to me, but you grow out of it. Eventually, most people do. And then Charles Darwin kind of discovered, he kind of pioneered the evolution and the concept of natural selection, and then the idea of nature versus nurture, which I have a little paragraph written about, which says, the long-standing controversy over the relative contributions that genes and experience make to the development of psychological traits and behaviors. And then an example of a topic relating to this is like, where do mental illnesses come from? Are they from your genetics entirely? Or are they from your experiences? Are they from some trauma that you experienced as a child? Are they from some trauma that you experienced in your life as no longer a child? Are they just from something that you experienced that wasn't necessarily traumatic in general? Or are they something that just happens for no reason? And the general conclusion of the nature versus nurture debate is that it's a little bit of both, but nurture has slightly more effect. And scientists are still debating about this today, but we had some specific examples that identical twins that were separated at birth because the mother gave them up and they were raised in different places. When they got back to meeting each other, you could see what things that they had were genetically affected and what things were just things. And we actually watched part of a video, or I watched part of a video because it was on Netflix at the time, and it was very interesting. So then, what are the different levels of analysis of psychology? The different complementary views for analyzing any given phenomenon, which are biological, psychological, and sociocultural influences. Wait a second. I'm a little bit confused. Pretend that the question 4 wasn't there because I don't think I read that right. My notes are very confusing, as you can tell. The biopsychosocial approach is made up of the biological, psychological, and sociocultural influences together, and it is a bit more of an eclectic kind of way to look at psychology, but it allows you to look at both the stuff that's happening in the body, the stuff that's happening in the brain, and the stuff that's happening in the environment all together, instead of having to look at them separately. Which I think is probably one of the more effective ways of working with clinical psychology. And then we have some subfields of psychology, which are psychometrics, which studies the measurement of human abilities, attitudes, and traits. Basic research just finds information basically about people and how they work, and then tells people about how they work. And applied research finds information and uses it to actively help people. So they find information, and then it's like the difference between basic research and applied research in a non-psychological context, because I don't have a psychological example right now, is that basic research is being like discovering a plant and telling everybody all the properties of that plant and what it's good for. Applied research would be discovering a plant, finding all the properties of it, what it's good for, and then using it to create a medicine that helps people and giving that medicine to people. That would be an example of that. And you guys may be wondering why this video is so long, and that's because I'm just going to clip it wherever it clips, but probably about here. And then I'm just going to keep talking, and that'll be the next video. So I guess this is the end of this one, so I hope you guys found that interesting, enjoyed it, and I hope whatever picture I drew was cool.